So in the previous video, we went through the steps to install Unity Hub, and Visual Studios 2022 on a PC computer. This time around, we're going to go through and get the software installed on a Mac and look at any differences that may come about in the process. So I'm already on unity.com, just like previously. I'm going to go to the download button. And once this page loads, it still says download for Windows, which we don't want to do. So where would we find the Mac install? So if I scroll down, here where it says download the Unity Hub, there is a link here that's going to download the software for Mac. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. It's going to pick a copy and drop that into my downloads folder. I'm on Safari here. That's the local or native browser on a Mac, where previously I was on a Chrome. So if the environment that you see here looks different, that's because I'm on a different browser than before. So I'm going to go ahead and go to downloads, and I'm going to open up the Unity Hub software. A little pop-up here. I want to make sure that I agree to the terms. This is going to then install the Unity Hub for me. So as it's running through that process, now this is different than on a Windows, where this installer has our application and it needs us to take the icon here, the Unity Hub, and drag it to the applications folder so that I can then install the Unity Hub software in the application process. So a few different steps than on a PC. So a few more seconds for this to finalize. There we have it. So now we have our Unity Hub. Now, with this installer, it's on the desktop, so I want to be able to eject this or remove this. So if I close, the difference is on a Windows PC versus a Mac is that on a Windows, if you were to close up the tab or the browsing window that you're on, it closes it out. Likewise, on a Mac, that just gets rid of the specific window that you're currently on. It could still have the application run in the background. In this case, this Unity Hub 3.5.0 needs to be ejected. It's like a little flash drive in a sense. It has an icon just like the other drives. So I'm going to want to eject this so I no longer have it sitting on the desktop itself. That's also going to be living here in the downloads, and then I can then just get rid of this if I need to as well. So now let's go ahead that we've downloaded and installed the Unity Hub. How do we find the Unity Hub? So if I was to close this out, on your taskbar at the very, very end is the Finder. It's a little face. I could press the space bar. Alt space bar. This is going to bring up the spotlight, which allows me to search for different applications, and I can search for the Finder. And then I'm going to open up, and I want to go to our applications, and I can look for the Unity Hub. There's our Unity Hub there. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on the Unity Hub. And Mac is going to want to make sure that this was downloaded from the internet. I want to make sure it's safe. It is. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. I can close this Finder window out right now while Unity is going through the process. And here we have Unity Hub loading. And it wants to install, just like previously, it wants to install the latest version. The difference between Mac and PC is that on the Mac, on the newer versions, they use the M1 or M2 chip, which is a silicon chip, and it's going to have this icon. You can, if you have an older Mac that has Intel, you can install a version for that as well. But if I look here, this is one more new version than the previous one. On the Windows video, we installed 2022.3.4 F1, not 5 F1. So if I wanted to make sure that both machines are consistent on the version, I'm not going to want to install this. I'm going to want to skip, and I want to look for that other version and make sure I get the correct one. So I'm going to go ahead and skip installation. This is going to want to ask me on a personal plan. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'll go ahead and use the personal edition, and then it's going to ask me to approve this. Yep. So now that we have Unity Hub installed, we need to go and locate the same version as our PC. So I'm going to go over to the Install Editor button, and here it's going to want to recommend the 3.5 F1. If you wanted to, and you wanted to install this version, make sure you get the correct one. See, there's one for Intel and one for Silicon, so make sure you know which version of your processing the computer has. Does it have an Intel chip, or does it have the new M1, M2 chip? So that way you install the correct one. Now we could install the recommended version and then go back to our Windows machine, our PC, and update that version to the new version. That's one way to do this. But if you wanted to keep it with an older version, maybe you started a project on an older version and you wanted to get that set up. Now, in order for us to download the same version as our PC, I'm going to want to go to the archive link here, and then I'm going to want to visit the download archive link so it doesn't take me to all the other versions that Unity has to offer. I'm going to click on that. It's going to load that page for the different long-term support versions, and I want to locate 2022, and then here it is, 2022.3.4. This is the same version that we used before. I already have the hub opened up, so I'm going to want to go ahead and click on Unity Hub. It's going to want to go ahead and open this up. And here we have, and here is the recommended version. I'm going to go ahead and hit install. And it's going to go through the process of the software or the modules that it needs, just like on the PC. In this case, it's already here. It's saying the DevTools Visual Studio for Mac. Yes, I want to make sure that I install this because the Mac has its own version versus the PC. I'll scroll down through the platform settings here. And just to keep it simple, like with the PC, we're just going to only do the WebGL build later on. If you decide you're going to be building for different platforms, you can come back in and install those modules as needed. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on Continue. I'm going to accept the terms just like I did with the PC, and I'm going to install, so it installs that as well. We have 4 steps to cover here. We have the actual editor, Visual Studio for Mac. Mono Behavior is a secondary software that the Mac for Visual Studio needs in order to run the C# programming language as well as the WebGL build. So I'm going to go ahead and let this finish downloading, and I will come back in a moment. So now that we have all the components installed for our Unity editor that we needed to, we can go ahead and close out here. And now we have that version installed. We can go to projects, and now we're at the spot where we can create our project using macOS versus our PC. So if you watch that video on how to create a project for Windows, it's the same process. We need a specific location for our project to live. Depending on where you want to put your project, I would create the same thing as well and go through that same process. In the future, most of the projects that I'll build will be on the Mac OS version of Unity versus the PC, but I may hop back and forth depending on what may come about that. So you can go ahead and close this out. I want to make sure that we have set up the Visual Studios the same thing. If I press the Alt space, it's going to bring up the spotlight again. And if I type out Visual Studio, I'm going to want to locate Visual Studio. It's usually the purple kind of infinity symbol. That's the application for Visual Studios. If you have downloaded Visual Studio Code, you're going to get that blue icon instead of the purple. And so now it's going to go through and start setting up the install process for Mac with Visual Studios. Which keyboard shortcuts do you prefer? You can use the Visual Studios. If you are familiar with Windows, they have Visual Studio Code or Xcode. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the Visual Studio Code here as my shortcuts. I'll continue, and this may look a lot different than on the PC, but as we go through and create our scripts, I'll do a different version of each so you can see that working on both the PC and the Mac. And then once we are comfortable with our scripting editors, then we'll move forward into our projects themselves. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.